Every physicist knows that the second law of thermodynamics is the most unbreakable, most ironclad, most absolutely certain law in all of science. Arthur Eddington once said something to the effect of, if your theory disagrees with the second law, there is no hope for it. It must collapse. And I think most people, if you asked them on the street, if you said, why do we get old? Why does everything fall apart? They would say, even if they didn't know the fancy words, they would say something like, well, that's just how the universe works. Things wear out. Things decay, entropy goes up. You can't fight it. And if you are a physicist, you might nod along because it sounds very reasonable. The universe is marching toward disorder. That's the arrow of time. Oh, that's why your coffee gets cold, your car rusts, your hair goes gray, and eventually you die. Physics said so. Case closed. That is completely wrong, and I can prove it. Not partly wrong, not a little misleading. The core claim that aging is some thermodynamic inevitability, that physics itself demands you fall apart, is just flat out incorrect. And the amazing thing is, the physics that proves it wrong has been sitting right under our noses the whole time. We just weren't looking at it carefully enough. So let's look at it carefully. Let's start with the thing everyone agrees on, and then I'll show you where the crack is, and then the whole wall comes down, and then we'll build something much more interesting in its place. All right, the second law of thermodynamics. What does it actually say? I want to be very precise here because the sloppy version of it is what gets everyone into trouble. The precise version says this: in a closed system, one that doesn't exchange energy or matter with its surroundings, the total entropy will either stay the same or increase over time. That's it. That's the whole law. Entropy, which you can think of as a measure of disorder or randomness, or more accurately, as a measure of how many microscopic arrangements correspond to the same macroscopic state, goes up or stays flat, never goes down, in a closed system. And it is a magnificent law. It's the reason heat flows from hot things to cold things and not the other way around. It's the reason you can scramble an egg, but you can't unscramble one. It's the reason a glass can fall off a table and shatter into 1,000 pieces, but you will never ever see 1,000 pieces of glass leap off the floor and assemble themselves into a wine glass and jump back onto the table. That would be a decrease in entropy, and the second law forbids it, in a closed system. So here's the argument for why aging is just entropy doing its thing. Your body is made of molecules. Those molecules are arranged in fantastically precise structures, proteins folded, just so, membranes layered perfectly, DNA coiled and packed with extraordinary care. That is a very low entropy state, a very ordered, very improbable arrangement of matter. And the second law says, over time that order will degrade, proteins will misfold, membranes will leak, DNA will accumulate errors. The whole exquisite machine will slowly, relentlessly, inevitably slide toward chaos. That's aging. That's death. That's the second law of thermodynamics, written in flesh. Sounds pretty airtight, doesn't it? And I would agree with you, it sounds very convincing. I've seen auditoriums full of physics students nod along with this argument. I've read it in popular science books. I've heard it at cocktail parties from people who should know better. Entropy gets us all in the end. It's treated as one of those profound truths that separates the educated from the naive. And there's an emotional satisfaction to it, isn't there? It feels like wisdom, like accepting the deep truth of the universe. There's almost a nobility to it, standing there and saying, yes, the second law applies to me too. I am not special. I am just matter, arranged temporarily, and the universe will reclaim me. Well, nobility is nice, but I prefer being correct, because there is one enormous, glaring, obvious problem with this entire argument that somehow people just skate right past. You are not a closed system. That's it. That's the crack. Everything I just said about the second law is true, but it only applies to closed systems. And you, my friend, are about as far from a closed system as it is possible to be. You eat food, you breathe air, you radiate heat, you excrete waste. You are an open system, magnificently and continuously exchanging energy and matter with your environment. And the second law says nothing, absolutely nothing about what entropy must do in an open system. In an open system, entropy can go down locally. All you have to do is pay for it somewhere else. You decrease entropy here, you increase it more over there, and the total goes up, and the second law is perfectly happy. This is not some clever loophole. This is the actual physics. And if you don't believe me, look around. Look at a tree. A tree takes carbon dioxide and water and sunlight, and it assembles them into wood and leaves and bark, which are incredibly ordered structures. That is a massive local decrease in entropy. The tree pays for it by radiating heat into the environment and by increasing the entropy of the sunlight it absorbs. The total entropy of the universe goes up, but the tree, locally, becomes more ordered. Not less, more. Or look at a baby. A fertilized egg, one single cell, takes in nutrients from its mother and builds itself into a human being. Trillions of cells, hundreds of cell types, organs, bones, a brain with 100 billion neurons wired together with exquisite precision. That is an almost incomprehensible decrease in local entropy. That baby is getting more ordered, not less. And it does this for years. For about 20 years, in fact, a human being is getting more complex, more structured, more organized. Where is the second law? Where is the inevitable march toward disorder? It's there. The total entropy of the universe is going up the whole time. That the baby is radiating heat, producing waste, and generating plenty of disorder in the environment to more than pay for its own increasing order. The point is this: the second law does not forbid local decreases in entropy. Life itself is a local decrease in entropy. If the second law forbade aging reversal, it would also forbid growing up, healing a wound, and building a tree. Obviously, it doesn't forbid those things because they happen every single day. Your body right now, as you sit here, is performing acts of anti-entropy that would make a physicist's head spin if they really stopped to think about it. Your cells are synthesizing thousands of different proteins from amino acid building blocks, folding each one into precisely the right three-dimensional shape. Your immune system is identifying foreign invaders out of trillions of possible molecular shapes and manufacturing custom antibodies to neutralize each one. Your nervous system is maintaining billions of synaptic connections at exact strengths. All of this is local entropy decrease, paid for by the metabolic heat you radiate into the room. You are a furnace of order, burning fuel to stay organized. And here is what really gets me. Your body replaces itself constantly. Most of the atoms in your body right now were not in your body a year ago. The lining of your gut replaces itself every few days. Your red blood cells live about 4 months. Your skin cells cycle in a few weeks. Your skeleton is completely rebuilt every decade or so. You are not the same physical stuff you were 10 years ago. The matter has been swapped out, like replacing every plank on a ship while it's still sailing. Yet you persist, your structure persists, your memories persist, your identity persists. How? Because the pattern is maintained. The information is maintained. The stuff doesn't matter. The arrangement of the stuff, the information about how it's organized, that's what matters. Remember that, because that observation that the stuff doesn't matter but the information does is the key to everything I'm about to tell you. So, if the second law doesn't demand that you age, what does? Why do we get old? If the physics permits a local decrease in entropy, if the physics permits us to get more ordered rather than less, why doesn't the body just keep maintaining itself forever? This is where it gets interesting. Because the answer is not about energy, it's not about entropy, it's about information. Let me try an analogy, and I want you to hold on to this analogy because it's going to carry us a long way. Imagine you have a grand piano, a beautiful instrument, perfectly tuned, every string at exactly the right tension, every hammer at exactly the right distance. You can play Beethoven on it, you can play anything. It's a magnificent machine. Now suppose I asked you, does the second law of thermodynamics mean this piano will eventually go out of tune? And you'd say, well, sure. Over time, the strings will stretch, the wood will warp, the felts will wear down. And that's true. But here's the thing. The piano didn't go out of tune because the universe lacks the energy to keep it in tune. Energy is cheap. There is plenty of energy available to tighten a string. The piano went out of tune because nobody tightened the strings. The problem isn't energy. The problem is that the information about what the correct tuning is and the mechanism for maintaining it gradually got lost or degraded. And that, in a very deep sense, is what aging is. Your body has plenty of energy. You eat food every day. You take in far more energy than you need for basic maintenance. The problem is not that the engine is running out of fuel. The problem is that the instructions for running the engine are getting corrupted. Let me be more precise. Every cell in your body contains a complete copy of your DNA, your genome, the whole blueprint, all 3 billion or so letters of it. And that blueprint is remarkably stable. The DNA sequence you had when you were born is, with very few exceptions, the same DNA sequence you'll have when you die. The letters don't change much. The book doesn't get rewritten. But here's the crucial thing. Having the book is not enough. You also need to know which pages to read. A liver cell and a brain cell have the exact same DNA, the exact same book. But they are wildly different cells with different shapes, different functions, different proteins. How is that possible? Because they are reading different chapters. Different genes are turned on and off in each cell type, and the system that controls which genes are on and which genes are off, that system, that layer of control above the genes themselves, is called the epigenome. Think of the DNA as a massive instruction manual. Every cell has the same manual, but the epigenome is like a set of bookmarks and sticky notes and highlighting that tells each cell which pages of the manual to read. The liver cell has one set of bookmarks. The brain cell has a different set. The muscle cell has yet another. And these bookmarks are physical, actual chemical modifications. Little chemical tags, methyl groups, acetyl groups, attached to the DNA itself or to the proteins that the DNA wraps around, called histones. These tags are the epigenome. They are the reading instructions layered on top of the genetic instructions. And the system is staggeringly complex. Your DNA, if you stretched it out, would be about 2 meters long, but it has to fit inside a cell nucleus that's about 6 millionths of a meter across. So the DNA wraps around these histone proteins like thread around tiny spools, and then the spools stack on top of each other, and the whole thing folds and coils into this incredibly dense structure called chromatin. Some regions of the chromatin are tightly packed, which means the DNA there can't be read. Other regions are loosely packed, which means the genes there are accessible and active. The epigenome controls this packaging. Methyl groups on the DNA itself tend to silence genes, keep them locked away. Acetyl groups on the histones tend to open things up, make genes accessible. So the combination of all these chemical marks determines at any given moment which of your 20,000 or so genes are turned on and which are turned off in each cell. That's how a liver cell knows it's a liver cell. That's how a neuron knows it's a neuron. The epigenome is the cell's identity. And here is the key insight. The genome is digital. It's made of 4 letters, A, T, C, G. And those letters are copied with extraordinary fidelity every time a cell divides. The error rate is fantastically low, something like 1 mistake per billion letters per cell division. Remarkable. But the epigenome is more like an analog signal. It's fuzzier. It's more susceptible to noise. Every time a cell divides, the epigenetic marks have to be copied onto the new DNA strands. And that copying process is good but not perfect. And even between cell divisions, the marks can drift. Environmental stress, DNA damage that needs repair, normal metabolic activity. All of these things cause the epigenetic marks to shift around. Over time, these bookmarks start to drift. They get put in the wrong place. Some fall off. Some get added where they shouldn't be. The bookmarks get scrambled. What happens when the bookmarks get scrambled? The cell starts reading the wrong pages. A liver cell might turn on a gene that's supposed to be active only in a skin cell. A brain cell might turn off a gene it desperately needs. The cell starts to lose its identity. It doesn't know quite what it's supposed to be anymore. It becomes a confused, malfunctioning version of its younger self. And this loss of epigenetic information, this scrambling of the reading instructions is aging. Not entropy, not thermodynamics, information loss. This is a radically different picture from the one most people carry around. Most people think aging is about things wearing out, like an old car with rusty parts and bald tires. But it's not like that at all. It's more like a brand new car with a corrupted computer. The hardware is mostly fine. The software has bugs. And software bugs, unlike rust, can be fixed because the original code still exists. This is the extraordinary thing. The DNA, the underlying instruction manual, is still there. Intact. Complete. The problem isn't that the book has been burned. The problem is that the bookmarks are in the wrong places. And if you could somehow reset the bookmarks, put them back where they were when the cell was young, the cell should start reading the right pages again. It should start functioning like a young cell again. Now I want to be careful here because I'm about to tell you something that sounds too good to be true. And in science, when something sounds too good to be true, you should be suspicious. You should ask hard questions. So let me tell you the result first, and then let me explain why the physics not only allows it but practically demands it. Scientists have discovered that there are a small number of genes, a handful of transcription factors, that when you turn them on in an adult cell, they do something astonishing. They reset the epigenome. They take the scrambled bookmarks and put them back. The cell, which was old and confused and malfunctioning, starts behaving like a young cell again. Its gene expression patterns revert to what they looked like decades earlier. Its function improves. By every biological measure we know how to apply, the cell gets younger. These transcription factors were originally discovered in the context of something else entirely. A researcher was trying to take an ordinary adult skin cell and turn it back into a stem cell, a cell that can become any type of cell in the body. And he found that 4 specific genes could do this. Turn on these 4 genes, and a skin cell goes all the way back to a state like an embryonic cell. A total reset. It was remarkable. It won a Nobel Prize. But here's what's interesting for our story. If you turn on these genes for a long time, the cell goes all the way back to being a stem cell. It loses its identity completely. That's too far. But if you turn them on briefly, just for a little while, and then turn them off again, something wonderful happens. The cell doesn't lose its identity. A liver cell stays a liver cell. A brain cell stays a brain cell. But the epigenetic marks, the bookmarks, get tidied up. They get pushed back toward their youthful positions. The cell rejuvenates without losing its identity. It remembers what kind of cell it is, but it starts reading the manual the way it did when it was young. Now, why does this work? Why would there be a mechanism inside the cell that can reverse epigenetic aging? Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Every time a new organism is conceived, an old egg cell and an old sperm cell combine, and the result is a brand new embryo with an epigenetic age of essentially 0. Every generation, the epigenetic clock gets reset. That means somewhere inside the cell there is a program, a mechanism, that knows what the youthful epigenetic state looks like and can restore it. There's a backup copy. The original settings are still in there. This is exactly what Claude Shannon, the father of information theory, told us would be necessary for any reliable communication system. Shannon showed in his famous paper back in 1948 that if you want to send a message through a noisy channel, a channel that introduces errors, you need a way to correct those errors. You need redundancy. You need a backup copy that you can compare against the corrupted version. Without it, every message degrades, every signal gets noisier, every copy is worse than the original. Is it all? Shannon worked this out for telephone lines and radio signals, but the principle is universal. It applies to any system that stores and transmits information, including living cells. And when you think about it, a cell is fundamentally an information processing machine. It reads instructions from DNA, manufactures proteins according to those instructions, and responds to signals from its environment. It's a communication system, and like any communication system, it's subject to noise. The epigenome is the channel. The youthful gene expression pattern is the original message. And aging is the noise that corrupts the message as it passes through time. Shannon's great insight was that noise doesn't have to be fatal. If you build enough error correction into the system, you can transmit a perfect message through an arbitrarily noisy channel. All you need is a way to detect errors and a backup from which to restore the original. And it turns out cells have exactly this. The youthful epigenetic program is stored somewhere. We don't yet fully understand where or how, but it's there because we can access it. We can trigger the cell to consult its backup and restore itself. The scratched disk can be reread from the master copy. This is, I think, one of the most beautiful connections in all of science. A theorem proved by a mathematician working on telephone cables in the 1940s turns out to explain how a 60-year-old's skin cells can be made to behave like a 20-year-old's.